Greetings, humans. I'm going to read from a bit I wrote in, must have been 2008, after my first trip to China as a graduate student, um, doing some international psychology work, mostly following my mentor and professor, as he did international psychology work, but some really heavy experiences. So here we go. Uh, yeah, I still All right, Americans tend to value their independence. Indeed, we imagine most adults move ever away from childlike states and toward autonomous ones. Travel to foreign places can return us in many ways to the dependent states of childhood. Visiting China for the first time, many of us noted this dependence on our hosts, guides, and interpreters. Without someone to speak for us, we could not understand or be understood. Thus, we could not feed ourselves, ask for water, or even find a toilet or use the toilet we found. Most times we ate, someone brought forks, but not always. And not everyone was adept with the chopsticks. I could get by. My buddy had a terrible time with it. Without someone to show us the ropes, even quite simple tasks like crossing a road could become dangerous. Man, if you try and cross a road in Beijing or Nanjing and you don't know what you're doing, you can literally die. Very very dangerous. Away from the hotel, even using a toilet could be an ordeal, as our cultural norms were violated. Different architecture, no doors, no toilet paper. You have to bring your own, being three immediate hurdles. And some wonderful stories we have about not realizing that toilets were pay toilets and like being accosted for money and stuff. Very interesting experiences trying to pee. Unable to speak, travel, read, eat, or toilet, for all our advanced degrees and philosophic knowledge, we were just children in the world. This is a frightening experience for an American taught that adulthood equals independence. The ability to reflect on this experience, to accept the discomfort, and even become comfortable with the groundlessness of it all. This led more than one of our group towards some important psychological growth. The process of international psychology before the real work actually starts, then, is one of breaking down internal barriers, accepting ambiguity, and becoming more fertile soil for the dialogic process about to ensue. Failing to do this work might lead toward a reactive state in which one, knowing one is ultimately out of control, seeks control over every element of life within reach. Being in this state leads to closed mindedness and the end of dialogue before it can even begin. This work is about confronting directly our limitations, including our ultimate dependence. This confrontation is called jimian in Chinese. This is a difficult word with several meanings, including to meet each other face to face, to encounter courageously, and to face directly. We have to jimian this dependence in all three of these meanings of the word. First, we must encounter it courageously. It would be easier to be afraid of it, to act independent and perhaps wind up in some sort of trouble, lost or hurt, or causing some offense. A friend who was in his 70s, he ran for fitness, and he ran every day for fitness, and he wasn't about to stop in Shanghai, except his memory was going dodgy, and we lost him. We lost him for a day. Eventually, the police brought him back. They found someone who could speak English, and he showed up back at the hotel, with a police escort, very much chagrined and embarrassed. Too much display of independence. Second, we must meet and face dependence directly, which means without obfuscation or changing the subject or turning away. It is, as we say in America at the time of writing, what it is. Battle cry of Gen X, right? It is what it is. And lastly, we must encounter our dependence as a part of ourselves, towards which we must not aggress. Rather, meet this aspect of self face to face, open to the experience of other or self. Where Yalom 1980 talks of death as one of four existential givens, we know he really means limitation. All limitation points to death, all death to limitation. Lifespan is the ultimate limitation, but we're also limited in 1,000 ways by our needs for other people. Survivalists try to mitigate this dependence, as do adolescents, but really we are stuck with it. We type on computers we did not make to send data over lines we did not lay. We eat food we did not plant or grow or harvest, wearing clothes we did not sew, in houses or apartments we did not build. This sort of international travel, with its heavy existential purpose and theme behind it, is a sort of flooding therapy for the limitation avoidant. We jimmy these limitations because there is not really another acceptable option, not to people on an existential mission. Do I still think this? Yeah, I think I do. Um, this summer, there's about a 60% chance I'm headed back to China to a retreat center and then on to Beijing to do some therapy demonstrations, probably. And I will feel just the same, just as lost and isolated. And it's like floating away from the mothership in space on the thinnest of tethers. And if that tether breaks, uh, your odds of getting back to the mothership without a bunch of weird hassle, at least, are quite difficult. Having to rely on other people, like quite totally rely on other people. Um, as an autistic man who's like, I'm Denholm Elliott in the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right? Marcus, he got lost in his own museum, like that. I literally get lost on the college campus where I've been teaching for 12 years, you know, and lost in a big city, lost in Shanghai or Beijing or something is, it's a difficult, frightening, sometimes terrifying proposition. I have been left behind in a couple of groups. We're waiting for a bus or something to arrive, and I'll sit down and start reading, and then everyone else gets up and leaves, and no one like taps me on the shoulder, and I'm there still reading, engrossed in what I'm doing, and then I look up and I'm totally alone, and no one's looking for me. This has happened. It's happened a couple of times. So yeah, it can be. Yeah, you have diarrhea, and you want to go, and there's no Imodium. There's an herbal remedy or two, but you have to know how to ask for what you want. And even if you spoke some Chinese, which I don't, there's an idiomatic way to say I'm shitting myself to death and I need to pound a cork up there. Um, and if you don't know it, halls with mentholitis, not really a thing you can buy over the counter. It's just being in a different place where you're not really deeply immersed in the culture can really bring to the surface all of these dependencies we already really have. Uh, you're living in the US and you always have, and your English is fine and whatever, but you're always just like one or two steps from being completely lost and isolated. Your car breaks down in a neighborhood you've never been in before, and Now you're stuck working out, and you speak the language. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. But you're really suddenly depending on the kindness of strangers. My car broke down, and I called for roadside assistance, and they wouldn't help me. The person on the other end of the line just decided this was the day when they were gonna mess with mess with a paying customer, and for no good reason they just would not come out and provide any service. And like, okay, so now here I am broke down, and the thing I was counting on to protect me isn't there. You're always just a couple of steps from um, being outside of the social and linguistic and normative barriers that you're used to. And when you go to a place where you have none of the culture, none of the language, and you're depending absolutely on other people for these things, it can it can make you more aware. The danger is that it can make you less aware. That you come home and you're just like, I'm so glad to be home, in my place where I have the food and the keys and all of that, right? And then you're even more complacent because you've snatched back all the power that you were missing. But it can also be an invitation to come home and just like notice all of this, um, it, all of this power and illusory power, and start to let go of some of the more illusory forms of of being in control, of being independent, right? And help us grow beyond independence into inter interdependence. After my friend got lost running, at the time I was younger, and there was no gray in the beard and whatever, and fit, and I was a bit of a runner too. And I was like, dude, if you want to run, I'll go with you. I'll try not to slow you down too much, but I'll go with you. We'll both see the city. And he appreciated the gesture, but he was just so embarrassed by the whole thing that he was like, yeah, I'll just wait until I'm home. It'll be fine. The gym has a treadmill. Um, he turned away, right? He was fronting. He was trying to be more independent than he was really capable of, afraid to give up some power. And in the end, he couldn't take that step to grow into what I think is an even more powerful position, when you can admit that you need other people, and then they need you, and you need each other. Well, I guess that's all I have to say about that. Okay, bye.